Welcome to the Myofascial Magic in Action podcast. And for our audio listeners, this episode includes some video clips from our actual training program in Myofascial Magic in Action. It's absolutely stunning work and really recommend that you don't miss it. So hop over to YouTube to watch the full episode. Having said which, if you are on the podcast, we're going to describe it as well as we can. Welcome, Paul. How are you doing?
Hi, John. Not bad at all, love. Not bad at all.
So glad. So today we're talking about the third R. The first one was rebound. Hop over and watch that if you haven't seen it already. The second one was recoil. Ditto. And this third one is what we call release. Now, myofascial release, in inverted commas, is a very common phrase. And I have to say, I think I can honestly say I've come across more people that don't know what it is than I've come across people that do know what it is. And the truth is that myofascial release can give an impression of something that it isn't. It can give the idea that it's about going soggy, that it's about being totally relaxed, that it's about somebody removing a kind of a block in your tissue so that you can release, meaning relax. And it's a very crucial distinction that is mostly misunderstood, and we don't really have the best language in the world to understand what it is. Moreover, when we say release in the 5 R's of myofascial magic, we don't mean what everybody else is talking about. Once as a practitioner you've trained, or as a client you've trained with one of our practitioners, and you've gone through the rebound and the recoil, you've established most often an ability to really sense what we call your suboptimal patterns. So for us, release is really about pattern interrupt. And naturally, easily, without even thinking about it, releasing patterns of posture and patterns of motion that don't serve you. So, Paul, this really comes from, does it not, us experiencing, witnessing, treating so many people that operate under the myth that if you train the shapes that you want to perform, you improve long term. In other words, whatever sport or activity you love the most, more is better. What would you say to that myth?
Well, I think firstly, I just want to address what you said there about the commercialization of the word myofascial, or the phrase myofascial release, because I think it's been really commercialized to such an extent now that it really misses the very aim it was intended to achieve and help people attain, which is when you train or you work or you live and you feel a sense of discomfort or a sense of displeasure and that uncomfortableness within our body and our movement, there's often a tendency to recognize it as a threat in the body. And to get rid of a threat, it's like you're trying to get rid of a fly out of the room. You must attack it until you kill it and squash it. And that's been applied to the body in 1,000 modalities: compress, more pain, elicit discomfort to release the pressure. Instead of increasing pressure, it should be more aware and familiar of position. And what that means is if we organize ourselves in such a way, there should be almost a senseless sensation.
Yeah, it's what you're not feeling, right? You're not feeling an ache, you're not feeling struggle, you're not feeling inflammation or burning. And it's very interesting you say that, because a lot of people immediately go, oh, can you please massage my shoulders and take away that stiffness? And you're like, well, actually, hang on a minute. I'm not going to, as you say, attack it. How can we get you moving in such a way that it doesn't occur?
That's the re-education side, isn't it? Because, again, commercially and what is commonly understood to be beneficial, they must have some sensation to attribute to what's happened. And it must, work harder, no pain, no gain, feel the burn. Likewise, often with a sense of discomfort, it often results in people stretching themselves and try to stretch themselves out of discomfort or stretch themselves out of restriction. And it's just a misunderstanding of what's happening, not only through and around the skin, but beneath and intertwined and interwoven through the rest of our fabric and our neurological body. So once we understand that better, like we're trying to fill the gaps in lots of people's educational toolkit, the big missing piece is, how do we help people recognize the patterns that they've created so familiarly over their lifestyles and their life activities? And are they relying upon these movement patterns and styles, but unaware of the significant restrictions they're ultimately creating over this repetitive use of them? So we want to identify patterns that serve and keep them, reinforce them, or recognize patterns that are really limiting them or taking them to a position that we will have to address it sometime in the near to long future.
I know one of your main things because we do a lot of work with elite athletes and elite performers around the world. And I've heard you say it 100 times. You just can't keep doing the same thing until you become a victim of it. So I think that's the key thing that we're addressing here. And the myth that if you train the shapes you perform, you improve long term can be really powerfully reframed. And so I'm going to offer you this reframe that micro movement has macro effect. Micro movement has macro effect if you know what you're doing with it. And it actually matters much more than so-called macro repetition. And it's actually a superpower. And I think this is one of the pivotal points in the MMIA, Myofascial Magic in Action training, because we really go deep on how the fascial matrix works as an entire body architecture and really assist people in how to improve short term, but without going through what very often happens to sports people and dedicated movement, any movement, be it a sport or a general activity or a performance art like dance, for example, that they can plateau or break down over the long term. And I know you and I both are absolutely heartbroken when we see young athletes that don't make it, and what we would call a mature athlete who's barely in their mid-30s, who's injured in such a way that we feel wasn't necessary. If only we could challenge not so much the training, but the logic behind the training, that repetition, load, and performance-based training in terms of stats of achievement, as opposed to the body seeking to achieve them, are the keys, because they're just not, right?
No, I don't believe it's to be so. And I often say this, and I know it gets up people's backs, but there's nothing worse than seeing somebody become unable to enjoy their hobby or activity or sporting desire and be unable to continue doing it because of the way they did it or the way they pursued it so vigorously to attain a certain standard within a particular world of entertainment ultimately. And I often say our modern day sports stars are like the historical gladiators, and they're heroes, and we want to emulate them and we want to watch them and we aspire to be like them occasionally. But we shouldn't base our long-term health aspirations on their short-term entertainment value, because they all retire very early because they do reach peak performance early and try to maintain it for as long as they can over a short career. And when I say short career, that might be 10 years, it might be 20 years. But most of us are trying to live till we're 90, give or take a decade. And it's important that we try to understand the quality and the benefit of working so hard, but then in the aspiration to recover or manage the effects and consequences of working so hard, we shouldn't attack ourselves further in releasing these patterns as we recognize they're not really serving us. It should be done in a much more subtle and a much more delicate way, which really has a much more significant influence on changing the direction of the longevity of choice we're trying to re-grasp. And maybe we get a second wind in our lives, in our sporting lives. Maybe we get that second opportunity to recover more appropriately and more effectively, and then go again for another stint. But all too often, we see people often trying to recover as aggressively as the reason they needed the recovery in the first place.
Oh, let's not go down that rabbit hole. It's a huge one. But we're not just talking about elite athletes either, are we? We're talking about ourselves, our families. We've both got aging parents, and this process of aging, there's a lot of kind of anti-aging this and anti-aging that. And we're going to look at a particular movement that we're going to consider for a minute here on this basis is we all want to grow older gracefully, and we are all growing older. Please God, it's a privilege if you love life like we do. I know it has difficulties. I know there's loads to overcome. And the truth is, if you can get out of bed in the morning and feel okay about your day and be okay about what happens because you're receiving it in a body that can move rather than feel overwhelmed by this ache and that ache. Because let's face it, Paul, you only need a paper cut or a stubbed toe, and it just feels like, oh my God, my whole day's about that pain. But, last week I popped a rib doing a rather strenuous activity. And I'm telling you, it coloured how I travelled to the airport. It coloured how I taught all weekend. And thank goodness my colleague, your colleague, knew exactly what to do. And we ever so subtly undid I can't call it an injury. It was more of a little insult. But it was enough to affect how I travelled on the aeroplane, how I got my bags in and out. And I'm 65, so I'm no spring chicken. And I intend to be able to travel and carry bags and put them in and out of lockers when I'm 85. And my 87-year-old mother is still walking much better than she would have if I hadn't had this wisdom to give her. So we're not just talking about elite athletes. That's where we see measurable results, like one of our practitioners is supporting an Ironman who's at world ranking level, and he's just improving with these techniques, and others, national teams, and so on. So there's no lack of elite athleticism.
We use the data that's attained in that captive audience, yes, to create the parameters for how we treat the general audience and the general population of the world,
Exactly.
which is why we address it first, because it gives us clarity about why we're challenging it and why we're offering you something much more suitable and more appropriate for a much wider audience that requires a better service. And that's why our release will really transform people's longevity of choice. It just does so.
But we see it all the time. We see it, as you say, amongst the top athletes who are quite shocked at the difference it makes to them. I mean, literally, they come in like, oh, are you serious? I'm not doing this. And then they find out they feel completely different. They train differently. They recover differently. The whole quality of their self-awareness is different. It really is different. I mean, it's like, wow. And I cannot tell you the number of testimonials we get back from our practitioners in WhatsApp. We wake up every day because we're time zones all around the world to messages going, can't believe it. My client said it. Oh my God, my client said that. And I know it sounds like I'm selling the course, but we are both so passionate about this because we see it working every day in our practice, in our practical lives, and as the feedback from our participants in our program. True or false?
100%. And that's exactly these techniques and these movement explorations we've developed over a lifetime of learning what not to do. It's all about experimentation, right? I mean, we always follow the latest trend and the latest technique, but where we're a bit stubborn is we ask why. Why is it so good? Why is it not working for this particular client if it worked for that client? And we compare and analyze and talk and discuss. And out of all of the decades of experience that we've attained and all the hindsight that we've grabbed and put into our experience, we now can give the foresight to people so they don't have to end up in these predicaments that could easily be altered at a much earlier stage and phase of this attributed restriction that most people suffer.
Exactly. And what I love about it, I call it bioemotional intelligence. And you cannot go into AI and type in a question and get back this work. I mean, you can't. It's taken all of us, and there's a big all number of people, and there's like 35, 45 years each.
Well, there's a difference between artificial intelligence that has no experience and actual intelligence of physically doing it.
Bioemotional intelligence. Hello. That's what we call it for good reason, because we're constantly developing it. We're constantly feeling it. And in this world where AI is so important, I just think this is so essential as the basics, because the truth is when you get out of your bed in the morning, move into your office, move into whatever it is that you're doing, you may be moving into peak performance requirements, but you're also moving into peak performance at the desk where you're not going anywhere. So our very first piece in here of waking up this bioemotional intelligence regularly, not once or twice or 3 times a week for an hour and a half, but for a few minutes on the hour, one of the first things that we work with is pandiculation. bog standard, absolutely ordinary, beautiful yawning.
Body yawning. We call it a fascial reset. People can have whatever terminology they wish to do, but it's not a stretch. It's a contradiction to say it's like stretching. It may appear like stretching, but neurologically, fabric and architecturally, and chemically and biologically, it is nothing to do with stretching. It is to do with reorganizing in the moment. It is to allow it to wake up and emerge from what has already been hibernated from when you were sleeping. So now you can become naturally over the process of awakening, of reorganizing, becoming ready to perform throughout your day. Like you see a bear wake up or a cat wake up or a dog wake up, the very first thing it does, puts one foot down, finds itself on the ground, and it opens its mouth as wide as it can. And it just does it for as long as it needs to, once throughout its whole body. And you see the whole body will reverberate as it tries to explore how to stimulate and make it vibrant before whatever task is going to follow happens. And we as humans find it, of course, not as socially acceptable to yawn as every time we wake up. We try to hide it or we restrict doing it at all. Quite the contrary, we should be embracing yawning as much as we can. It's infectious. It's bloody good for you. And it will be great to start to your day if you initiate a really positive yawn. And if you don't in the beginning of your day, do it as soon as you can when you remember to do it. It will change the start of your day considerably.
Well, there's a couple of things I love about that, and that is, and we know it's called pandiculation. It's basically animals do it as a metabolic reset, but they don't do it 2 minutes before they're about to perform. Seriously? Have you ever seen a lion in the wilderness turn around to its mate and say, could you just keep an eye on that wildebeest for me while I have a quick stretch? Are you joking? They do the complete opposite. They squeeze down, they stalk, they tighten, tauten, tension, stiffen all the fibers of their body. Even the hairs stand up on the back of their neck as an information process. It's unbelievable. But the keystone to yawning, pandiculation, metabolic reset is that we do it after rest. We do it after we've been sedentary. And that includes sitting at your desk for hours, sitting in an aeroplane, sitting in a car. You've been still. You have to wake the tissue up to tell it, I want you to move. So just a simple interlocking of hands or making a fist and sending your arms away from you, your feet away from you, your head and neck while you yawn allows you, it's a multifunctional process. It's not just an acceleration into a shape, it's a deceleration at the same time. It's actually exquisitely complex for the body and exquisitely powerful as a resource. So yawning, reaching, wiggling, wobbling, all absolutely fantastic, especially after you've been sleeping or sitting for a period of time. So that's the first thing that we call the R of release. The next one that we're going to look at is something straight out of our training. And that is a key concept of relief rather than release. So a really common practitioner mistake of this, what we call basically feeding the possibility of repetitive strain injury, where too much or nothing at all to handle pain and discomfort is very often about the pressure to perform overwhelming the restoration of position. So part of this release is something called positional release, but it's part of everything we do, really. And we play with some positions. We're going to start this with looking at 4-point kneeling. Now, 4-point kneeling in yoga, a very, very common posture. We call it cat-cow for some bizarre reason. I'm sure I could work it out one day, but I've never have quite. And the standard way of doing this 4-point kneeling is to place the hands under the shoulders, to have the thumb and the little finger, the thenar and the hypothenar muscles pressing into the floor. And basically, it's centered around the phrase arch and curl. Except if you're in MMIA, myofascial magic in action, where you really want to create small changes for whole system effect, where you're facilitating the release of suboptimal patterns. Now, I want to ask you about this one, because as you set this up with the lovely Helen Eady, who was our model for this, One of the things that you are very, very clear about, Paul, is setting up the foundation really specifically so that these micro doses of specific motion have the macro effect that you're talking about. What was it that you were doing with this? What were the keys?
Well, the key to all of this is if you're performing either in an athletic performance or a relieving sensation performance, either way requires an appropriate position to begin from. And each version of that positional beginning will get you ready and stimulate you to perform in a certain intensity. So if I was to do the traditional, your version of cat cow, and plus have a cat stretch, and I call it cat, what the hell are you talking about? Because we're human beings, is that your hands need to be in a position where you're not limited by where you've placed them. So they should be ahead of your shoulder, not directly beneath them. Your arms are not stilts. Your arms are not legs. They don't perform like legs that shouldn't be expected to receive the full body weight like legs, but they should be capable of managing you being above them, but not be inhibited by their responsibility of carrying you and then taking away their ability to allow movement to then subsequently follow. So in this position, what we would do is we want to go as wide as we can, but forward of our shoulders. So when you see her from the side, because she's a yogi, she really does want to have her hands directly under the shoulder because that's habit. She has a pattern that she's established that she relies upon. So I try to keep edging her forward with her hands, but it's unfamiliar to her right now. And she takes a little while to grasp that and understand the benefit of positioning her hands forward, because then what you do, you prevent yourself using momentum and throwing yourself over the wrists as your head travels towards the room ahead of you. And what it does, it allows you to remain in an optimal position, just slightly behind the wrist, but you're giving your best organized integrity to your spine to move within the shoulder and the hip if you position this way. Likewise, the knees, normally in a performance, we're doing cat, stretch, cat, cow, cat, what the hell, you'd have your knees together because that's more of a skeletal organization because you need your body to perform in that way. In this one, you'll notice she's much wider. And the reason for width is to access more space. Because we want to find the bones, don't we? We want to understand the bony relationships between the bones, and they're all communicating together. And those virtual spaces that reside between each of the solid elements of the skeletal system must have space to maneuver within. But it's maintaining a slightly constrained organization so they don't slacken into those spaces, but not so constrained that there's no yield to move with it. So it's just getting that nice balance, which why the base matters the most, so that you can then be exploratory and start going sideways. Normally, they don't move. They just move their arm forward or their leg backwards or contralateral or interlateral or whatever configuration they move the limbs. But often we need to move off center and we're going to go to the side. And you notice how Helen, she's invited to go sideways in this lateral way to transfer weight, to see how she recovers and finds and organizes and it gets to express the space that should be there. So as you reorganize the bones, you get a relieving sensation. You remove unnecessary, undue, stressful resistance.
Yeah, holding. Yeah.
Yeah.
So in this one, you spent quite a while placing her, setting her up, and then you made sure there was what we call appropriate spinal tension. And I know we all say that we're allergic to tension, but that's just a complete misunderstanding of body architecture. You actually need sufficient tension to have the right balance of the posture. And then you started moving side to side, and then you brought her into this lovely circling. And it was just so beautiful. And I remember her saying that it just felt as if she was kind of oiling everything.
Correct. It has a hydrating effect, doesn't it? As you, all
Yes,
bones
it
are
does.
round, so all movement should have a round aspect to doing them. You referred to the
Love it.
cats earlier, and they're stalking. They're not robotic cats. They don't just shuffle along. You see them rhythmically organize how their bones help allow them to crouch low, to be able to propel themselves forward, to stalk their prey, to change direction, to go and rest and sleep again somewhere else. And we should have the same capacity to do that, the ability to change shape in motion. And that's what's so hard. We tend to fix positions and work on repetition from that fixed position instead of allow time for the process of change to occur, to allow the process of sensations and feedback to be understood and then adapted because of whatever you feel and however you're performing, that it can alter accordingly. Maybe more speed, maybe less, maybe more range, maybe less, maybe more refined micro movements, maybe bigger. It very much depends on how you feel your body's responding to your invitation to the movement.
Well, the next one that we're going to go deeper on that theme is supine lying, but using a bolster in a very particular way. It's not just about being soggy, it's about lifting the spine off the ground, but using the supine position to find the bony relationships and explore in a slightly more unusual way, I think, that just gives the body the opportunity to feel where it is in space, but learn the more subtle positioning. Does that make sense?
Totally. And that's the thing, isn't it? If we want to find the subtlety of movement, we need to place ourselves in space. Because when we place our bodies on the ground, then we're prisoners and hostages to that surface. Our shape is dictated to because the floor can't change shape. So by utilizing either a foam roller, which can be quite fixed in regards on densification of roller, it's quite a solid structure, even the softer versions. But they're very good, they're very useful. Or you can use a towel, a beach towel that you roll up. What we've got is professional bolsters. They're delicious. Most yoga places have them. As a plastic instructor, steal them. If you're personal trainers, go and raid the studio because they are awesome. And they're like a big sandbag. They're basically a sandbag, but they're quite forgiving on your weight, and they accept and distribute you through them. And what you've done then, you've elevated yourself. Yes, you're in a levitated position on these bolsters, which then accommodates your own unique shape of your bones and honors the curvature that exists through them. And once you've done that, now you're in a position of release. You're in a position that is relieving. You're not trying to hold it together. You're allowing it to be the way it is. And then it allows those bones to undulate subtly. It's not being conformed and being dictated what it can do. It's being allowed the opportunity because of its situation to explore what it wants to do. Which side does it prefer to rotate towards slightly without feeling threatened and falling like off a roller or off the smaller towel? This is more accommodating to that rotational bias, but it will allow you to go there and come back without feeling threatened that you're going to fall off. And then that's when we start to introduce the arms, because the arms then stimulate motion of the spine and they accentuate and they bring you much more aware to your rotational preference. As you swing your arms, your body will want to veer off to one side just by the nature of moving them. But in a supine position, you don't feel overwhelmed by the movement of the arms. You feel much more heightened sensory aware because of the arms and how your spine must respond to them. But being higher and with the feet being lower because they need to be on the ground or you would fall over, right? Well, that does it allows the freedom of the pelvis to feel less threatened and less of a requirement to position it in such a specific orientation to stabilize. We've had this conversation many times and we will continue to have it, that we want to embrace our ability to be unstable, dynamically unstable, and experts of it. So this allows you to take away the performance element, but still access the ability to change shape in motion when necessary.
I love it. And what we're actually generating is a habit of awareness that is really subtle and it's really sweet. But I know for myself, when I was going up and down the steps to get on and off the airplane, there actually was a moment where I had a great big coat on, so I couldn't really see what I was doing, and the wind was blowing. I've got a bag in each hand, and I'm first down those steps, and you really have to have a sense of, I can do this, it's not a problem, because I didn't have a free hand to hold on to anything. I had hand luggage in both hands. So I thought to myself, wow, this is actually what I'm training for without even realizing it. The work I've done with the Myofascial Magic in Action program that I've reinforced in my body, it immediately, instinctively goes, okay, take a breath, let's get present. And down those steps I went.
Well, you've established in the past, previously, most people establish patterns of movement that they rely upon. But the world is a bugger and it throws curveballs into your life. And if you're not practiced and role played unpredictable circumstances that your body doesn't feel threatened by, it feels excited that's happened. It's like an alert system. We don't need the emergency services to arrive. It's just not normal. It's just unusual. It just requires a different sense of dexterity. It just has a different tempo and an adaptation. So it's patterns that are constantly able to adapt in motion is what we're always trying to encourage people to embrace and enhance.
And I got so much of that out of this third R. So the last one that we're going to look at, this clip, brings everything together, still uses the bolster, But this one is really going even deeper on this sense of accessing different positions to create release and facilitate the ability to actually preempt, aren't we? We're bringing up what I call our preception, our ability to be so aware, but we anticipate, like I did on the steps with a bag in each hand. I just had a little second thought and I pulled myself back. I just rebalanced and then I just took one step at a time. I was absolutely fine. But had I not been so aware that my instinct pulled me into the place I know I can function optimally, it was almost like I had to get out of my head and into my body because I knew it knew what it was doing. Does that make sense?
100%.
Yeah. And so this last one that we're going to talk about today under the release, it's one of many more, but I think this one's my favorite because we emphasize safety, feeling safe in our own bodies. I think that's a really big deal, don't you?
Yeah, but safety in a nice way, not in a relieving way because I've been threatened all my life. It puts you in the most exquisite position to access, which we in our therapeutic world call positional release, which is where you're now self-organizing to self-relieve all the unnecessary pressures and burdens you've had to tolerate throughout your day, week, month, and years in life. And it's a real gem. It's a real reward for everything you've put in before being here. And it's what your body needs the most. But most people don't focus on stillness, on calmness, on restorative positioning, and allow the body to recover itself via its own ability to do so. We tend to interfere too much and try to stimulate it to do it, and we try to guide it, and we tend to just get over involved. Whereas if you can get yourself, like you'll see Helen here, and she's lying on her side, it's the most awesome situation to be in. Again, we've stolen those bolsters so we can use them well because they're brilliant. And they're
well, as a yoga teacher, we don't steal bolsters. We bring them to the classroom. So I'm just, I get
Mancunian, so we steal everything. So anyway, we get the bolsters and we position it in such a way where you almost get back into your fetal beginnings again, where you're in that lovely fetal position where you're not threatened at all and you're very comfortable, and it allows you to embrace you being you in a very safe but nicely vulnerable situation where you can organize yourself to organize the weight of yourself through yourself so it distributes properly. And what then happens is your nervous system goes, wow, I'm under no threat whatsoever. I don't have to perform. I don't have to stimulate any chemistry to prepare for movement or reaction. I'm trying to de-react. I'm trying to desensitize. I'm trying to enjoy being here as a reward for doing all the movement I've just done or I have to do shortly. And there's no need to stretch. There's no need to pummel. There's no need to put more pressure. There's no need to stick things in your butt, in your shoulder, or anywhere else for that matter with these hardened balls or any variation of the massage guns that are out there in the world. Are they helpful? Yeah, they can be helpful. But your body, if given the opportunity, doesn't require any interference whatsoever. And as a therapist, this is one of our gifts because I always start and finish my treatments with this particular movement called positional release. I get them to see if they can calm themselves first. If that's possible, then we're already in the right track. If it's not, I then interject and try and organize an opportunity to see if I can reorganize on their behalf. And at the end, after the treatment, I then see if they can do this themselves. And you'll notice Helen's lying here now, and she's ready to go to sleep. Her body recognizes it's in this lovely parasympathetic system. It's very, very relaxed. It doesn't feel threatened in any way, shape, or form. And if I left her there, open the door, closed it, turn the light off, she'd still be there today. Because it is so nice. It's such a nice thing to do. And your body then recovers. And then it's incredible if she then goes back to our first invitation of the release, which is the yawn. She would then wake up and she would do a really full exploratory yawn and she would pandiculate the hell out of herself in the most delicious, invigorating way. And she would get on with her life again. And she never had to stretch or massage or do any restorative, rehabilitative processes at all. She just allowed her body to go through the cycle of completing a cycle of activity to recovery, to restoration, to begin again.
Absolutely. And then what you did was we did a little bit of fascia whispering, didn't we? We went a little bit deep and removed the bolster under the arm and the leg. And you just kind of, in this lovely way that you have, deepened the practice of the bone placement. So we're really reinforcing everything we've done. We're getting all those bones to move. And without the bolster, we're just trying to come from this deep, I want to say relaxed position. It's a weight.
It's an active relaxed situation. It's actively relaxed.
It's dynamic
It's a
relaxed, actually, yeah.
variation on tuning, isn't it? Like, you don't want it to be such a high frequency all the time. Sometimes our activities need to be active, but it's an active awareness of
Yeah.
a very thoughtful approach to moving subtly. And it's taking the time to investigate how thoughtful you can be to yourself and recognize the rhythmic relationships all of our bones have together. And when they move rhythmically, they don't get in each other's way and they don't feel threatened and prevent movement occurring adjacent or distal from them. But once they feel accommodated and supported and organized properly, there is no interruption and you don't get any defensive responses at all. And it can happen in the blink of an eye, but it does take time to recognize how to access it yourself. So be patient, but have fun in understanding the value of stillness as much as you enjoy the activities that require the stillness to follow.
Well, I love this because what you can see, those of you that are watching the video, is that Helen's actually got a ball under her head and she's side lying, and then Paul takes away the bolsters and she does these absolutely beautiful circular movements, very conscientious about not bone placement so much as bone moving everywhere in the body. And having done what we call finding the bones, we call this dancing the structures. And it's really very beautiful and very much about hip rolling and being able to not big gross movements, but micro move in those positions. And then as you see from this last part of the clip, the actual training clip is obviously quite a bit longer than this, but just resting back into that original position, you really made her cozy. I remember, like you said, she really wanted to fold in and stay there and just be in herself even more. I mean, isn't that just a gift in itself?
It is. Once you've gone through that choreographic dance of the bones where they want to move freely, but collectively and organized together, that you see that what if it feels relief of, oh my God, I've undone a pattern that did not serve me. I didn't need to hold things still. I didn't need to prevent something moving while I move something else. I needed to understand, and we all do need to understand more clearly, how bones are always in motion, even if we're asking for stillness while something is moving more aggressively or with more velocity. But it's understanding those rhythmic relationships that allows you to access the stillness that should then immediately follow.
Well, I love this, and of course I love it. I mean, we created myofascial magic in action, but what I think we can bring this all together now to summarize what we've done here is that I think most people think they need to add more load, more structure, more effort. And I really hope that what you got out of these clips, those of you that are listening or watching them, you get to see that more effort can sometimes actually create more restriction if we're not listening. And I love this practice because it really is conscious that you can't force release. You actually have to allow it. You have to give it permission. And even though these movements look very, very small, they really do change everything because we're not adding something new onto the body that it has to perform. We really are revealing something that's already there. And this is where it's so important, this ethos that we have, that you are not learning postures, poses, and repertoires to apply to people, like kind of branding them with the ability to do that perfectly, but rather you go to the profile of the individual. You kind of releasing those patterns that don't serve them. And this happens very particularly when anyone reaches a performance plateau or they're post some kind of surgical intervention or there's been some problem. And it can actually be an emotional disturbance as well. And I think that this feeling of safety actually supports every aspect of our beingness. And it's the part that isn't taught, isn't it, Paul?
It's our reliance on domestication and conformity to society's services. No animal in the world gets to see a vet in the wild.
It's true.
And if we were in the wild, we'd look after ourselves. We would move with more purposefulness. We would rest a lot more frequently. We would perform a lot better when needed to, but recognize our limitations and not force athletic performance to achieve something infrequently and unnecessarily. And that's the difference. And that's where this then returns us, not back to nakedness running through the bloody streets, we'd all get arrested. But it returns us to our understanding of what this tissue is capable of doing itself. And it lets us honor our natural architectural blueprint and myofascial being. Because once we understand what we are, it will really do almost anything we ask it to do, but we must reward it for doing it, not attack it further and then make it perform again, and attack it further and make it again. And it's this vicious circle, this energy crisis we get into, where we're so desperate to recover from the abusive approach of our expectations to perform and make it transform so it can perform. And yes, there's a process to that in certain elements and certain regions within our society's expectation, in the sporting world, for instance. But generally, it's unnecessary. But what is necessary is this restorative respect for what you are and who you are and how you retain that presence of excitement, of vibrancy, of having a fulfilling life without having to suffer when you're recovering.
I love it. And, it's helped me recover from pretty serious illness. And I personally, this is one of my favorite sections. And I just want to remind everybody that we began with rebound. We then had recoil. This is what we call release, meaning releasing suboptimal patterns. And we're beginning to find home. And in the next episode, we're going to look at restore, the fourth R, where we've having, if you like, let go of or dissolved or allowed ourselves to deepen into the release of suboptimal patterns. We're going to look at restoring more of what's already there and really honoring how we move. And unlike a lot of, I think, performance-based trainings and achievement, we want to look as good as the person on the next mat, or we want to be able to do as many of those as we're supposed to, all sort of done by numbers. We're kind of adding to that, expanding that, going kind of underneath that before that. We're not in competition with it. You carry on doing whatever classes and practices and activities you want to do. Take a step back and deepen into, if you do nothing more than wake up in the morning and give yourself a few minutes to breathe, yawn, find the corners and bring yourself into standing with your beautiful breathing, you will actually begin to release those patterns yourself. Paul, thank you. I know we could talk for another hour on this. We're both so passionate about it. And we call this the prehab that avoids the need for rehab, right? And we do it for good reason, because
opportunities are there for us to achieve the most remarkable things with each of ourselves. Reward yourself for those efforts and the durability we want to maintain, but we don't have to torture ourselves in the process. And you can if you wish. Absolutely. It's always available. But it's such a valuable lesson. Think of a mathematics equation. One thing having a problem to solve and then just coming up with the answer. But the process we're offering you to go through our rebound and our recoil and now the release is the elements within the equation that allow us then to introduce restore, which will ultimately allow us to refine and become super skilled at it. But each of these steps are part of the equation that you need to understand and work out for yourselves which element is more beneficial to you in whatever dosage necessary for us to move on and keep progressing. So try not to skip through them. Try to embrace them and jump in and delve in as much as you can and get the most out of each one of the R's. So collectively, you end up with the brilliant answer at the end. Because even if the answer is not quite the right answer, because there's always work to do, there'll always be changes and adaptations to continue to. Of course, but it's going through the process of doing this mathematics.
Yeah, love it. Really appreciate it.
Have fun.
And so if anybody wants any more information, if you're a practitioner or you're somebody who's fascinated and wants to know of a practitioner that might be in your area, please don't hesitate to contact us. You can leave us a message on YouTube. We get back to everybody, or you can email through to info@myofascialmagic.com if you want more information. Or you can book a call and just have a chat with me or Paul. And we'd love to hear how you could add these beautiful facets to your own practice because we work towards this ability to refine whatever sport, whatever activity, whatever methodologies that you use, because it's deepening your ability and your client's ability to be themselves better. Thanks so much. Thanks, Paul. Have a great day, Doug.
My pleasure. Look after yourself, guys. Bye-bye.